Good morning. We're learning as discussed for Shlema Filan Chaya Basarach. We're on Daf Chof Tes Amid Beis on the bottom line, right after the two dots. Agra, just it's really a continuation of the previous Gemara. Agra Chamua de Rabbi Abba. Agra, the father-in-law of Rabbi Abba, Havale Yiseris Besifrei. He had extra letters in his sefer, in his tefillin or sefer Torah. Also, the Kamei de Rabba came to Rabba. He asked him, he asked him what's the halach about it. Like we was talking about the cases, we had discussed that there were limits about how many mistakes there could be in each column, or not in each column, in each yeah, but we said in each column, in each daf. Then and it had more than that amount. He asked him what to do. That which we said that you have to be goines, a sefer Torah that has more than the requisite amount in each daf, that's only with where it's missing, and you have to write in. Obviously, less than ba. But if you have extra letters, you just can you can erase them. That's not a problem. If you are missing, and then there's, like the Gemara said before, there's not extra room. You have to add in extra letters. The extra letters get added on top. There's too many of them. It's mechzik kimenumber. It looks bad to have so many additions. But just erasing an extra letter, it's not so obvious. So it's okay if you have more. Idach. Then we had said before there were two things that Rav had said, and there was a brisa that contradicted it. Idach the Amar Rav HaKosev Sefer Torah. Someone who writes a Sefer Torah, Bal Ligmar, and he comes to the end. Goymer Afilu be'emtza hadaf. He finishes it even if he's in the middle of a column. You don't have to stretch it out to make sure you reach the end of a column when you reach the end of the Sefer Torah. Meisvei HaKosev Sefer Torah. Bal Ligmar yung be'emtza hadaf. Someone who comes to the end of a Sefer Torah should not finish it in the middle of a daf, in the middle of a column, but rather, which is the way when you come to a chumash means means the other chumashim, Bereshis Shmois, Vayikra Bamidbar, that there it's not a problem to finish in the middle of daf. El makatzo helchat soif daf. But he has to make a shorter line. Rashi has different versions of it. You see how Rashi writes it. You make each line successively shorter. It looks a little bizarre to me. There's other pshatim that say that just you make all the whole column narrower so that it works out that everything is equal. So, but in any case, you see that at the end you can't finish the middle of a column. But that's what he's talking about. He's talking about by chumashim, not by a sefer Torah. That means that I think it means the middle of one of the earlier chumashim. In fact, sometimes the Gemara, when it talks about a chumash, is referring to a sefer that only includes one of the chumashim. But over here, I think it's talking about the chumashim of a sefer Torah. In fact, the Gemara about sefer Torah, how could you say it's talking about the chumashim? It said sefer Torah. So the Gemara about chumashim shall sefer Torah. It's talking about the chumashim of a sefer Torah. Sagt the Gemara, Ini v'amar Yeshua barabba, amar Rav Gidol, amar Rav le'eni kol Yisrael be'emtza adaf. He says that you should write, or we'll see what it means. He says the words le'eni kol Yisrael, which are the final words in Zois HaBracha, that's be'emtza adaf. So you see, even the final words of the Sefer Torah can be in the middle of a amud. or a daf. So Gemara hi be'emtza shita idma. So that doesn't mean be'emtza daf. What it really was saying is be'emtza shita, middle of a line. Hi be'emtza shita. Rabbanan Amri af be'emtza shita. Rabbanan say even in the middle of a line. Now it's not exactly clear what that means. Rashi's pshat, which is a little bit hard to. He's saying that you could even finish it in middle of the line, and for sure in middle of a daf. There's other mafarshim will give, I think, a different pshat. But let's go weiter. We will become clear. Rashi Amar be'emtza shita davka. Rashi says only in middle of a line. Oh, so this, no, I'm sorry. Rashi was the one that is different pshat. So Rabbanan say even be'emtza shita, and certainly in middle of an amid, in middle of a daf. Rashi says be'emtza shita daf. So I'm going to skip over Rashi's pshat because Rashi's pshat I found to be hard to understand. When it says it has to be in middle of a line, it means that he disagrees. He says that you can only finish in middle of a line, not in middle of a daf, but legabe in middle of a daf, that he says you can't do, which is hard. It's hard to say. I think he says that the other pshatim are that Rav Ashi is saying that you have to finish the last line in middle of a the last words have to be finished in the middle of a line. There's no reason given, but I mean, if you think about it, it's more deceptive. If you have something ending at the end of the line, you don't realize you're at the end. When it comes to the middle of the line, then you realize you're at the end. It's like a gap afterwards. So the halacha is like Rav Ashi that it has to be bedafka in the emtza sheet. Amishu barabam Rav Gidol Amarav. Shmoyne psukim shebetayra, the last 8 psukim in Zayis HaBracha that end in Be'enei Kol Yisrael, which start with that Moshe's death. Yachid Kairoisan, Beis HaKnesses. A Yachid reads them in the Beis HaKnesses, which I believe Rashi's shot. What was Rashi's shot? Yachid Kairoisan Zog Rashi Adam Echad Kairin Ve'im Mafzik Bein Taying De Lamed Acha Velikris. You don't divide it up into separate aliyahs. Taisvis says, Shemayin Psukim Shabbatayv Yachid Kairoisan Rav Meshulam Hayem Farsh Lumutu Shal Yikra Shliach Tzibar Imay. That it shouldn't be read by a Bal Kaira like we do, but rather it should be read by a person who gets the aliyah. Bekashal Rabbeinu Tam, the Me'achacham Le'erigil She'isai Shliach Tzibar L'Kair B'Torah. They didn't have Bali Kriya. Someone who got an aliyah read from the Torah. The Mukhbar Sheni Megillah, the Minkar Shana. Yeah. Okay, so it's an interesting discussion. Okay, so let's continue. Command, this is not like Rav Shim, the Tanya. Vayamasham Moshe Eved Hashem says that's the beginning of this parsha, that Moshe was nifter. Efshem Moshe Chai, because of Vayamasham Moshe. They asked, how is it possible that Moshe could write that he passed away? Yehuda says that part until then was written by Moshe. The last 8 psukim were written by Yeshua ben Nun. V'amila Rav Nechemia amalei Reb Shimon. V'amila Rav Nechemia. V'amila Rav Nechemia. Some people say it was Reb Yehuda. Some say it was Reb Nechemia. Amalei Reb Shimon. Rav Shimon disagreed. Efsher Sefer Torah chaser ois achas. Is it possible that the Sefer Torah is missing something written by Moshe Rabbeinu? How could it say about this Sefer Torah Hazeh? We've seen in the last few blot that Hazeh is always a lashon ma'akev, and it says L'kocha Sefer Torah Hazeh. This whole Sefer Torah should all be written by Moshe Rabbeinu. How could 8 psukim be written by Yeshua ben Nun? Elad kan Hakadosh Baruch Hu Omer u'Moshe Kosev. Until here, the Rebbeinu Shalom would say u'Moshe was the base. I think it's Omer ve'Oise. The Shita. Yeah. The Moshe would say the word of to be written in the Torah, and Moshe then would repeat it and write it down. From there on, the last 8 psukim, which discuss Moshe Rabbeinu's Petira, when the Rebbeinu Shalom dictated to Moshe Rabbeinu, instead of Moshe Rabbeinu repeating it, he just wrote it with tears. He wasn't able to repeat as he was wont to do in the rest of the Sefer Torah, because he was mourning, he was sad, and he couldn't bring himself to repeat the words. He would just write it down. Others have different pshatim that means he literally used the tears as the ink to write it. Baruch mipiv yikara alayis kol hadvarim ha'ela. And Baruch said, from my mouth, you're going to read all these things. And I'm going to write it b'dyoy. So you see, there's such a thing that when someone writes something over to him, he says that Yirmiyah said to him what to say, and he said it over, and he wrote it with ink. So you see, there's such a thing that you repeat what you're supposed to say. So in any case, Lema Deloika Rabbi Shimon. So this whole question, this machlokes was brought because we had said earlier that machlokes. I'm sorry. Of what does it mean? Shmona psukim in the Torah that a yachid kairei son. So we said that's so we were understanding that the reason why it all has to be read in one soup, you can't divide it into separate aliyahs, is because it was written by someone else. It was written by Yeshua. It was different. But according to Reb Shimon, it was also written by Moshe. It was just, he wrote it slightly differently. So it's not, the Gemara seems to understand it's not enough of a reason to make a rule that they all have to be together. Those 8 psukim all have to be written together. So the Gemara feels to Reb Shimon, Hayol Vishtani Yishtani. The Gemara says no. Since according to Reb Shimon, it was written B'dima, that is enough of a reason, even though it wasn't written by Yeshua ben Nun, it's still enough of a reason that it should be all together. Someone who buys a Sefer Torah Menachos, who purchases a Sefer Torah k'chayt mitzvah Menachos, it's like he's grabbing a mitzvah. But someone who writes a Sefer Torah, it's as if he was makabel the Torah from Har Sinai. We're 2/3 of the way down on Lamed Amud Aleph. Rav Sheshes, but if he has a Sefer Torah that needs to be fixed, and he fixed even one letter, Malav Akasav Kilu Kasvei, the Torah treats it as if he wrote it, and he gets the full credit. Tanar Rabbanan, Oisim Adam Yuriya Mibas Shalodafin Bas Shmoinadaf. Each, if you, as we know, when you write a Sefer Torah, it's made up of different sections of parchment. And the Gemara is saying that there's a limit, there's a minimum and a maximum of how many columns you can have on one section of parchment. It has to be between 3 and 8 columns. You can't do more or less than that. And you should not be marba the dafrin. You can't. That means you shouldn't make the what do you call it? The piece of parchment, each urea, you shouldn't make it too small and then squeeze onto it a lot of columns. It looks like a letter. If you make it to squeeze together, it looks like a letter. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what that means, because I know I've seen very small Sifrei Torah. So I guess it means in relative to the other dafim, you shouldn't make one very small. Or I guess maybe make the width very small relative to the height. This is below yimit bedafin, and also you shouldn't make too few columns, meaning make very wide columns. If you don't have a lot of dafim, then they're going to be wider. Because you have very long lines, it's hard to follow. We sometimes get to the bottom of a long blot of Agadata, and I'm having a hard time finding the beginning of the line when we get to the end of the line. Ella could go in lemishbechayseim, gimel panim. The proper size of a line is like the word lemishbechayseim 3 times. Nizdamlo lo yiriya bas tisha dafim. If it works out that he has one piece of parchment with 9 dafim in it, lo yichlik shalosh lekan v'sheish lekan. You shouldn't divide it into 3 and 6. Ela arba lekan v'chomish lekan. You should try to divide it evenly. That's more appealing. That's only in the beginning of the sefer. Even if you have one pasuk, and even if you have one column on the last part of the Sefer Torah, or actually, does it mean sefer? Yeah, I think I'm not sure if that means at the end of the sefer of one of the chamashim. It means at the end of the Sefer Torah. Can you really say that you're going to have one sefer, one pasuk that's going to go the entire, that's going to be the whole last, what do you call it? The whole last Uriah and the whole last daf. But as we know, we said that you have to end at the bottom of the daf. So how are you going to have one pasuk that's going to last till the end of the daf? So the Gemara says, no, what you could mean is you could make a very narrow daf by using one word from the pasuk, from the top to the bottom. Shir gilyon milamata tefach, the amount of space you have to leave around in the margin of the Sefer Torah. On the bottom, you need to leave a tefach, which is 4 etzbos. Maila gimel etzbos. On the top, you need 3 etzbos. Ubein daf ladaf kamoli revach roichav shtei etzbos. And between one column and the next, you have to leave the width of 2 fingers. Ubechumashim and a chumash. Now this chumash means a separate chumash. Rashi says, they're not made for Sefer Torah, but you still make a margin from them. Over there, it's 3 fingers at the top and 2 on the bottom, and on the vertical, between the 2 sides, between the 2 dafim, the 2 columns, the width of a thumb. Ubein shita l'shita, kamali shita. Between one line and the next line, you have to have the width of one line. Ubein teva l'teva, kamali ois ktana. Between one letter and the next letter, like the smallest letter, like a yud. Between one word and the next word, it has to be like a yud. Ubein ois lois, kamali chotasayra. And between one letter and the next, you just within the same word, it just has to be the thinnest opening, even like a hair's breadth. Al yamat adam esaksav lem be'revach shalmata, v'loy be'revach shalmayla, le'merach shebe'shita le'shita. A person shouldn't reduce the size of his letters to make it work out, to have more space. One of these things, if it's missing the margin somewhere, don't make smaller letters. It's more important to have the right letters. I don't think these things are ma'akev. So as far as aesthetics are concerned, better to leave the letters the same size instead of making smaller letters to fit into the margin. In order to leave the space between one parsha and the next. This damali teva bas chomish oisius. If he ends up at the end of a column, at the end of a line, he has a letter, he has a word that has 5 letters in it, and it's really only space for 2 letters. He shouldn't put 2 in and let 3 protrude into the margins. Better, he should you have to have at least 3 in the daf, and you can't have more than 2 sticking out. So essentially what it's saying is if you're stuck, if you have 5 letters, if you get 3 in, and you only have 2 sticking out, it's okay. If you have 3, then you shouldn't do that. You're gonna have to either make the letters smaller or else write it on the next line. If he has a word, he finishes the line and he has a word of 2 isius, lo yizrukenu lebein adafim. Even though we just said you could have 2 letters protruding, that's only as part of a word. But if you have a word, let's say sham, you can't stick it after the line sticking out into the margin. He has to write it at the bottom of the next line. I'm not sure what is it that's drawing this person not to write it on the next line. Like what is his Yetzirah to do so? I guess it means that where he's in the middle of writing and he already got to that. Then he maybe has to erase it. Hataya b'shem, someone who makes a mistake in the name of the Rebbeinu Shalom, meaning he forgot to write it, or he put it in by mistake. No, hataya b'shem, guris masha kasav. All right, someone who left out the shame. Guris masha kasav b'toila es masha gara. So he has to write in the Shem Hashem. Now we've said before that if someone leaves out a word, you can write it on top. If there's not too many of those mistakes, you just write in the letter on top. But if you left out the Shem, you can't do that. It's not bakavadik to have the Shem Hashem on top. So therefore you have to erase what you had already written, write the Shem Hashem there, and then what he had erased, he puts on top. Because of Hashem, al makam hagar. He writes the Shem on the place that he had scraped off. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Omer, af toilen is Hashem. Rabbi Yossi says, no, you could even be toilen Hashem on top. Yitzchak Omer, af meichek v'kaisav. Yitzchak says, you don't even have to do a gerera, a scraping off, which makes the parchment like new. You could even just erase. When you erase the letter, it's still somewhat visible. And when you write the shame, it's not going to be as clear. He says that's okay. It doesn't require gerera because Rav Yehuda says that it's not covered for the shame to be written not on fresh parchment, so you have to do a better method of erasing. Rav Shimon Shizuri Mekol Hashem Kulei Toilen Miktsasai Ein Toilen. He says if it's the whole Shem Hashem, you could put it on. You could be toilet on top. I'm sorry. Kol Hashem Kulei Toilen, right? Miktsasai Ein Toilen, but you can't do part of it on top. If you had skipped part of the shame, you can't do that. Which that means that on other words, you can, if you can only fit part of it in, you could be toilet. You could toilet part of it. You can't do any of these options. You can't do it even if you scraped it, and certainly not if you meichik it, and you certainly can't be toilet. So what should he do? He has to take away that entire section of parchment and put it into gniza and rewrite it. Itma. Halacha toilen is Hashem. He said the halacha is you can be toilet Hashem. Rabbi Bachana Rav Yitzchak Bar Shmuel halacha moichik v'kaisef. He says halacha is you can erase and write. Why are they saying the halacha and not saying which one of the Amoraim said that shita? Because there are those who have different Tanoim saying which shita. So you just said the halacha, what the halacha is, instead of saying who said it. We know maybe gula oil, but in this case, it was necessary to do it by saying the din. Amar Rav Bar Chanina, Amar Ula, Amar Chanina. Halacha Reb Shimon Tzuzuri. He says halacha in this is like Reb Shimon Tzuzuri. In addition, whenever we say halacha b'shem Shimon Tzuzuri, halacha is like him. Ahai. On what was he saying this? He's saying this rule that whenever we say halacha of Shimon Tzuzuri, the halacha is like him. Ilay mahar Shimon Tzuzuri. If it's on the Shimon Tzuzuri that we just mentioned, Shimon Tzuzuri v'kol Hashem kulei Thailand miktsasa ein Thailand. But itmer Allah Amar Chanan Alam Rav halacha Thailand is Hashem. Rav Bar Chana Amar Rav Yitzchak Bar Shmuel halacha ma'ichay v'kaisef. V'misa hunami lim. If you're saying that he paskins that halacha, Rav Chanina says halacha is like Rav Shimon Tzuzuri. In every case, let also mention that Rav Chanina paskins like Rav Shimon Tzuzuri. But instead, we just said these other two shitas, that Thailand and the Meiche. Ela ha. Rav Shimon Tzuzuri Aimei afilu ben Chamesh Shanim. We're talking about a ben pakua. Halacha is if someone shechts a female animal and you find a vlad inside of the animal, if it wasn't viable, if it wasn't ready to be born, the halacha is we say one man the Amma says that that if it's not viable, if it's not yet in the 9th month, then it's kosher. Everyone agrees with that. But if it's already viable, if it's already it could survive on its own, if it's in the 9th month, then the first man Amar says that it's not going to be a shechita. It's going to be if you kill it, it will be a nevela. And now we're saying a different shita. Even if it survived. And it's a 5-year-old ben pakua, and it's going out and plowing in the fields. Shchitas ima mitarasa. It's still going to be kosher based on the shchita of the mother. You can just chop its head off and eat it. So this was Rav Shimon Tzuzuri. Maybe this din was saying this is what he was saying. Halach is like him. So come on, itma Allah zeiri Amar Chanina hilch halach Rav Shimon Tzuzuri. Ziri says b'shem Rav Chanina. The halach Rav Shimon Tzuzuri. Emisa hunami lem. Amar of Chanina. So why is this? What is this dalad? Ela Amar Zeiri. What does Rashi say? I guess it's Ravin Bar Chanina instead of Chanina, Rav Chanina, right? Because it's saying of Rav Chanina, right? Because the original thing was Rav Chanan Bar Chanina. What was his name? Who said Amar Ula, Amar Ravin Bar Chanina, Amar Ula, Amar Rav Chanina, Halach Rav Shimon Tzuzuri. I guess that wasn't. I don't know. It seems to be Rav Chanina in both cases. Let's also mention from Ravin. So Ela. So we're still looking for a different place where this will be relevant. This din. Someone who's being taken out to be executed. He says, write a get for my wife. You write it. It's maybe this sounds familiar from Gittin. Even though he didn't say kisvu v'tnu, we understand that he means that he wants to stop his wife from being neifel yibam. Chazu loimer afa mafarish v'ayotze b'shayara. They went and they added even someone who goes out into he's going out on a trip. Shem suzuri amafa misukin. Even someone who is sick, he's seriously sick. We understand when he says write a get, he means to give it. Inami aha. Shumas ma'isha shel d'mai shechazul l'mkoimeh. If someone separated, you got the mice, so you're supposed to take off the trumas and mices, and he took off the trumas and mices, he took off the trumas mice, but then it mixed in together with the rest of the demai that he had to take it out of. Now, demai is only midrabanan that you have to separate. Demai is something you bought from Aretz, so we're separating l'chumra. So Shimon Shuzuri Yomer af b'chayil. I'm sorry, we said Trumas we say that you're allowed to eat it, because even though you have mixed in, you really should say it's Trumas Ma'aser. It can only be eaten by a kohen. You're on Shabbos. We're makel that you're allowed to eat it, and we disregard the Trumas Ma'aser that you did l'chumra because of covered Shabbos. We don't want you to be left because you're going to lose out on this all this food. You're not going to be able to eat it because of what you did misafik. So we allow you to disregard the Trumas Ma'aser. Shem Suzur Yaf B'chayil. They said you could even do the Shem Suzur said you could even do this B'chayil. Shayaloi v'oichloi al piv. You can go. What could you do? You go ask which normally you can't do. If you buy demai, you can't ask the Amaretz, did you separate the Trumas Ma'aser, because we don't trust him. The same way we don't trust him to do it correctly, we don't trust him when he says it. But we said on Shabbos, since you don't have a choice, you can't separate the Trumas Ma'aser, so you can do so. And Reb Shimon Tzuri says even b'chayil, when there's a din that you can't separate, so I'm saying, what is the din? Let's see Rashi on this. Because I forgot what the difference is on Shabbos, and I know you can't separate Trumas Ma'aser, but in any case you can't separate in this case because there's nothing. You have Trumas Ma'aser mixed in. You can't take from what was already taken. So he forgot to take Ma'aser. The you're allowed to ask the Amaretz and eat if he says that he already took the Trumas Ma'aser. L'motzei Shabbos lo yochel ad she'aser Trumas Ma'aser shel demai shechazu. Lo yochel ad she'aser. And Motzei Shabbos shouldn't take until he takes off. So this is talking about, we just forgot before Shabbos. Trumas Ma'aser shel demai shechazu. B'Shabbos she'ein lamai yochel. Then yochel litrim b'Shabbos v'kilu v'cham etzlei sh'noi Shabbos haylu demai d'Rabbanan. Rabbi Amaretz ma'asin hein. The Achshav ein lo takana. They keep in the Nikra Shem Shuma. But the Maso it makes the whole thing d'mai. The Zu Amar Shem Shuzui the Af B'chol Tzay Mechal Moiche Shem Hefset Chulin V'Shoyloi Im Hifrish Meiser Kodesh Shemachal V'Oichel Al Piv the Nipsa Shloi Chola Al Zeh Shem Shumas Meiser the Kfar Nifta. Okay. Says you could even do it b'chayil. I'm not exactly clear. I understand why on Shabbos, if it didn't fall back in, on Shabbos you have the eight. You don't have the eitzah to take off the Trumas Ma'aser now. So then you could be shayil. I guess he's saying even b'chayil, when it fell in, so you're going to lose it, then you could ask as well. Zok the Gemara. We say that Allah is like Rishim Shazuri and Mesukin and Trumas Ma'aser Shal Demai V'Em Isa Hu Nami Lema. Let's also say that it's not just Rabbi Yochanan who says Allah Rav Shimon, it's also Rav Chanina who says Allah is always like it. Allah Rabbi Yosef ben Kifa Omer Mishum Rishim Shazuri Pul HaMitzri, which is a kind of I think legume Shazaroi Lezera, that you planted it for seed. You're planning to use it for your next year's planting. So it's not being planted as vegetable that has a different din, where you have to take meiser from each year's crop. You can't mix meiser from one year to the next. So miksasei hishus l'nei Rosh Hashanah, miksasei achar Rosh Hashanah. If some of it took root before Rosh Hashanah, and some took root after Rosh Hashanah, and the standard for something that was planted for zera, this palamitzah that was planted for zera, it's not treated as a vegetable, but it's treated as a grain, and therefore its standard is when it took root. That's going to determine which year it is. L'gabe meisus. So say ein time mizal zeh. You can't take truma from one group on the other group if they're from different years. Like you said, you can't switch years. So what you do? You mix it all well together. Once you make it evenly distributed together, you don't take a little bit from one. Let's say if you have, you don't know. Let's say you have one pile of last year's and one pile of this year's, and you're sitting next to each other, and you take, let's say you have to take 10 gallons of tvua. You can't take 9 of them from one pile and one from the other, because you're going to end up that you're going to be using some of the truma from one to the other. But rather, we have to do is make sure they're very evenly distributed, so whatever you take is going to have the proper proportion to each one. So maybe this is the din of Rav Shimon Shizuri. He's like, should have also mentioned this, as Rav Chanina said this. Amar Papa Asheda. He said that this halacha legabe Asheda, which is a kind of wagon. Nachor Yitzchak Amar Yayin. He says it's talking about Yayin. Did I skip? I think Amar Papa Asheda. Nachor Yitzchak Amar Yayin. Papa Amar Asheda the Tanan. What does it mean? Asheda be'shamay ayim nimdedes mi'befnim. If you have, there's a certain size of a kli, a wooden kli, that has more than 40 saw, is not makabel tuma. So we have, when you want to, sheder normally means like a wardrobe, I think. But it means a movable wardrobe. If it's more than 40 saw on the inside, then it's not makabel tuma. So as you measure on the outside. Nimdad. You don't count the legs of this wagon, and you don't count the lavzavzavin. What is that? Mezgeres savav lefiyam. It's like a trim around it. You don't that's not counted as part of it. We agree that the legs that hold it up and the thickness of this trim, this apron around it, that it gets measured, but the space between them is not measured to include in the 40 sar. If they're more than a tefach high, the raglayim that hold it up, then it's not, the part in between is not measured. But if it's so short, then you count the area in between them. Okay, we'll have to stop over here. I'm sorry, it's already 7:10.
All right. Thank you.
We're gonna I promise we're gonna get back to Stam soon.